Richard the Lionheart is one of the most popular medieval warriors ever. But how did he earn his title? But Saladin gave him no respite and swiftly moved to recapture the vital city. Jaffa had been the Crusaders' main port and supply base in the Holy Land for decades, and losing it would cripple them. Plus, it contained thousands of European Christians who would be slaughtered if the city fell, so defending Jaffa was critical. But upon seeing Richard leap from his ship onto the beach, he realized it was a trick. Cheers erupted among the Crusaders and shouts of defiance echoed across the sand. Their city, their faith, and their very survival were at stake. They fought with every ounce of strength and determination they possessed. The stakes couldn't be higher, but instead of panicking, he calmly leaped off the fallen beast, seamlessly transitioning into a fighting stance. As Richard fought tirelessly, Saladin, observing from a distance, was struck by the Englishman's extraordinary courage. He wanted to prove himself worthy of the kingdom his father had built, and what better way than to protect its lifeline to Europe, Jaffa. From his position on the beach, Richard was a whirlwind of fury. His sword flashed like lightning, leaving deep gashes in his foes. But even as he hacked and slashed, he remained calm, his eyes sharp and focused. He was like a lion cornered, fighting to the very last breath. Finally, after hours of relentless fighting, Saladin's forces broke and fled. They retreated in disarray, abandoning their siege and leaving behind the field of battle to the victors. The Crusaders, though battered and weary, had defended Jaffa successfully. Richard's gamble had paid off, securing the vital port city. However, the cost of the victory was evident. Richard's army, once proud and strong, was now depleted and in desperate need of rest. The constant threat of attack had taken its toll. He negotiated a truce with Saladin, agreeing to a 3-year peace. It was an unprecedented move. No Crusader leader had ever shown such restraint. It was a remarkable agreement that held Saladin's forces in the Holy Land and allowed European Christians to travel to Jerusalem for pilgrimages. Still, Richard had secured England's place in history. He had fought alongside his knights, proving himself as much a warrior as any of his men. His deeds in the Holy Land, whether viewed as victories or defeats, had solidified his reputation as a skilled warrior and a visionary leader. The treaty, however, did little to assuage the anger of the Christian zealots back home. They saw Richard's departure as a sign of weakness. But Richard was tired of the bloodshed. He yearned for his homeland. As Richard surveyed the battlefield, the cheers of his men ringing in his ears, he knew he had won a great victory. But it wasn't a victory without sacrifice. He had defended England's interests, advanced his people's cause, and carved his name in the annals of history. But there was a hint of weariness in his eyes. The battles may have ended, but the scars of war ran deep. Richard, the Lionheart, had proven himself on the battlefield, but it was at home where his true legacy lay. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Richard the Lionheart had proven his mettle in the Battle of Jaffa. It was a stunning victory for the Crusaders, and Richard's name echoed in the ranks as a true hero. His presence alone was enough to rally the faltering Crusader troops. Richard himself was sick with exhaustion. The Crusader army was severely depleted, making it impossible to continue the war effectively. Though outnumbered, the Crusaders stood firm, their spirits lifted by their Lionheart king. The Muslims, despite their larger numbers, started to falter. The task was daunting. The city was in ruins, the population decimated, and the economy shattered. But Richard was up to the challenge. He organized the remaining troops, setting up a defensive perimeter around the city. But his thoughts were already on the future. Saladin, realizing the situation was turning against him, knew he had to act fast. A full-scale assault on Jerusalem was out of the question. Richard had come to the Holy Land to conquer, not to hold on to a city that wasn't truly his. These questions echoed in Richard's mind, unanswered. Could he turn the tide before it was too late? Only time would tell. This gesture of magnanimity, though small, offered a brief moment of camaraderie amidst the intense battle. The air grew heavy with the clash of steel on steel, the cries of the wounded and the roar of the combatants. Every strike of the sword brought the Crusaders closer to either victory or annihilation. The tension on the battlefield was palpable. Holding his sword aloft, he continued to carve a path through the enemy ranks with sheer determination. Richard, with his strategic brilliance and unmatched bravery, was leading his men to an astounding victory. But it was far from over. The Muslims, though weakened, were still a formidable force, and they weren't about to give up without a fight. This display of unwavering bravery and skill left his followers awestruck. The Muslim ranks, demoralized and exhausted, started to crumble. Seeing their chance, the Crusaders pressed their attack, driving the Muslims back towards the sea. Richard, with his armor dented and scratched, but his spirit unbroken, led the final charge. They rallied around their valiant leader, finding strength in his indomitable spirit. Together, they stood firm against the relentless onslaught. Meanwhile, Saladin's forces felt the heat of the Crusader counterattack, but they soon realized they were facing a formidable opponent. Richard was now in the thick of the chaos, his blade flashing in the sun. Despite being outnumbered, the defenders fought valiantly, repelling attack after attack. With only a few hundred men, Richard reinforced Jaffa's defenders, and they faced thousands of Muslim soldiers in desperate hand-to-hand combat. Every Crusader soldier fought with their last ounce of strength. With a battle cry, he hacked down an opponent, sending his head rolling across the beach. The very sight of their fearless leader inspired the Crusader soldiers to fight with renewed vigor. This lone warrior, covered in chainmail, literally jumped from his ship onto the beach, leading his small contingent directly into the enemy. In a thunderous roar, Richard raised his sword and charged forward. His knights followed closely behind, crashing into the unsuspecting Muslims. This unexpected attack stunned the Muslim forces, turning the tide of the initial assault, and turned the tide of battle with one of history's greatest gambles. After retreating from Jerusalem, Richard returned to the port of Jaffa, desperately hoping for reinforcements. Yet as July rolled on, no reinforcements arrived. Saladin was quick to capitalize on this, realizing he had a golden opportunity to destroy the Crusader army once and for all. If only he could hold out for a little longer. But how? Richard didn't wait for his main army to arrive. He immediately set sail for Jaffa with only a few hundred Crusaders. It was an incredibly risky, desperate gamble, almost like a suicide mission. The odds were stacked against him, and if it failed, Jaffa would be lost and his army would be decimated. On July 27, 1192, Saladin's army launched a massive assault on Jaffa. The Crusader defenders inside the city were outnumbered and on the verge of surrender. Things looked bleak. Valiantly, the bishop blessed the troops and they prepared to face death bravely. For many, it would be their last battle. Jaffa's fall seemed imminent, but then Richard received word that his army was just a day away. When Richard's small fleet approached, Saladin assumed it was a relief force and ready to accept surrender. Their morale plummeted as they saw this armored warrior leading the charge. Who was this mysterious knight? News of his valor spread quickly throughout the battlefield. Soon, Richard's men reached the top of the city wall, joining the desperate struggle to defend Jaffa. As the battle raged on, Richard found himself in a tight spot. His horse was killed beneath him, and amidst the chaos, an interesting incident occurred. Richard wasn't just fighting to defend Jaffa. He was fighting for every inch of ground his father had conquered before him. The tide of battle slowly turned, and Richard's bold gamble began to pay off. As the battle raged on, the fate of Jaffa hung in the balance. With Richard at the helm, the Crusaders fought with renewed determination, pushing the Muslim forces back inch by inch. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the momentum had shifted decisively in the Crusaders' favor. It was a sight to behold, a lone warrior amidst a sea of enemies, and yet he was winning. The following days saw the remaining Muslim forces gradually withdraw from the region. With the immediate danger past, Richard's focus shifted to securing Jaffa. He knew that his army was too weak to continue the war. As the weeks passed, Richard made a decision that surprised everyone. So in 1194, Richard signed the Treaty of Jaffa, ending the Third Crusade. Richard returned to England a hero, but his legacy was tarnished by the accusations of his detractors. As Richard looked out over his kingdom, he knew he had accomplished much. Thanks for watching. Which battle should we cover next? Let us know in the comments below.